Welcome to Perspectives in Peds, or PIP for short, your go-to podcast for insights into paediatric practice. From clinical approaches and emerging research to the everyday wins and challenges, we bring you OT perspectives that inform, inspire and spark conversation. Welcome back to PIP, everyone. I am joined by my colleague, Danni, today.
Hello.
And we are very, very lucky to be joined by Melinda Shambrae from Word by Mouth. She's a speech pathologist, and we are going to be discussing SLDs, or specific learning disorders. So thank you, Melinda.
Thank you for having me.
We're very excited.
Yes, thank you. So am I.
Yeah, I'm going to read your bio. We say this every time. We haven't memorised the bio, but I don't want to do anything a disservice here, so I'm going to read it out. So Melinda is a paediatric speech pathologist with 30 years experience. She co-owns Word by Mouth Speech Pathology, a private practice supporting children, families and schools in the eastern suburbs of Melbourne, as well as East Gippsland. Melinda has worked in the Department of Education, and she set up a Language Consultancy team in Eastern Region. She has worked in the Learning Difficulties Centre at RCH, where she first developed her interest in learning difficulties and the link between oral language and literacy. Melinda has lectured at the University of Melbourne, consulted for SPELD Victoria, participated in a number of projects for Speech Pathology Australia, including contributing to the professional body's position paper on speech pathologists working in literacy. Melinda has a master's by research, and in addition to her clinical work with children and families, she has supported numerous schools by providing professional learning in the areas of speech, language and learning difficulties.
What a bio. What a bio.
I like that.
That's because I'm really old. Yeah. When you said 30 years, I was like, yep, there's the grey hair.
It's so funny because I was like, when I said 30 years, I was like, wow.
I know. I get like a happy feeling about that too.
Oh, do you? The passion's still there.
Yeah, I think that's it, is to have been in a career for that long. I think you must really love it.
Which,
I do. Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Yeah. But welcome.
Thank you.
We have asked you here because we have so many questions about SLDs as OTs, and you have quite a vast experience in supporting these kids and young people. So we're going to just fire some questions at you.
Go for it.
We were very, very grateful that the team at KidLink contributed to some of these questions as well, because we often ask them as a team, and we're like, you know what? Let's ask the person that has the answers.
Yeah, we might need another podcast.
But we'd love to know, just to start, Melinda, what drew you to working with kids with SLDs as a speechy, and why does this topic matter to you?
I think I've spent my whole career working with kids in schools. So I started off in the Department of Education, and then when I left there, I did a lot of I worked at the Royal Children's Hospital in their Learning Difficulty Centre. And so over all of that period of time and working with kids in schools, I'm working with kids who don't have the foundation skills for literacy. So first of all, that's oral language, and then what are the next skills that they need? They need phonological awareness and phonemic awareness, sound letter correspondence, which is euphonics. So I saw kids who didn't have those foundation skills that they needed to then build up their literacy from there. And that led me to my master's by research too, which was looking at, what are the predictive factors for literacy success.
Yeah, right.
So then when I was at the Children's, I did a lot of additional learning and research in the area. So it feels really natural, and I've always worked in schools, and I'm a really strong advocate for speechies working in schools with kids. So yeah, I guess it's been a really fascinating journey for me to support these kids clinically, to look at the assessment process and look at how we diagnose SLDs, and how a speech pathologist has a huge role to play in that process because of our background knowledge in language. But then also the intervention. So why it matters to me is the intervention at the end of the day, supporting students to build their skills so that they can engage in their learning and feel that success, because it's a life skill. They need these skills for lifelong learning, for lifelong language learning as well, because it becomes reciprocal. We learn language, we learn literacy. We need literacy skills to continue to develop our language. So yeah.
I have a 6-year-old who's just started prep, and watching her learn how to read has been the most fascinating thing, because I think it is the most obvious learning I've ever witnessed in terms of, and she's taken quite strongly to it, which is really cool. But in the holidays, she hasn't had her reader to do at school, but she reads everything or attempts to read everything.
That.
And so I think in terms of what you were saying about it being a life skill, she's really passionate about reading. She finds it really interesting and writing, and that's always been her jam. But if you were a child who struggled with that, that is in your face 24/7.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you actually highlighted a really important point that it isn't innate. Oral language is innate, right? It's a biologically primary skill, but learning to read isn't. So we have to teach kids how to do this, and you've observed her going through that really formal learning process, and
it's fascinating.
It is.
Especially as someone who has a love of learning. She has a love of learning. So it's a really lovely thing to witness, because for her it has been an easier experience because of her interests. But to watch the progression of it over a 6-month period is just incredible. And we pull up behind a bus and she's sounding out the advertisement on the bus. And so when I think about, I have a nephew who really struggles with he's got great oral language, but has really struggled to learn, I guess, the structured processes or rules around literacy. And he's doing some tutoring now, and that's been really beneficial for him. But it must be confronting to have that put in your face all of the time, not necessarily advertently, but inadvertently, and really struggle with that.
Words
so I think it's so
everywhere.
important.
Yeah.
That's it.
It's funny. I told Danni I've got twin daughters. They're 4, and they often come into my room and they'll just pick up the novel that's next to my bed. And one of my girls was like, "But Mum, how do you read the words?" And I was like, "Oh, darling." I was like, "Well, Danny's daughter." I was like, "When you get to big school, you'll start learning that." And she's like, "I want to learn now." But
it's such a weird thing to think that you couldn't do that.
Yeah, I know.
As an adult.
Yeah, absolutely. But we'd love to know from your perspective, Melinda, when working with young children, what might be some of the earlier warning signs we might see that may start us to think, do we need to go down that diagnostic pathway of an SLD?
Look, I think for caregivers, parents, watching kids in that first year of schooling and even before then, it's really important to be looking for things like an enjoyment of print, interest in books, interest even in drawing and fine motor activities, because that can be a bit of a red flag for writing. But that enjoyment from stories and from books, and wanting to have a go at reading. Oral language is the biggest red flag. So for parents and caregivers, but then also for speech pathologists, OTs, allied health professionals working with young children, is oral language developing the way it should be? Are there language delays? Are there speech delays? Because we know all of these things are related as well. So a speechy should be looking for regular reassessment and review of not just speech, if that's what we're working on, so speech sounds, but also oral language. And then those early pre-literacy skills of phonological awareness, phonemic awareness, starting to build that code knowledge, knowing what their name looks like, knowing the first sound in their name, wanting to write it, the environmental print that you mentioned before. So, making connections that sign represents McDonald's and that notice on the bus says something, and reading that environmental print or not.
Melinda, is there gender differences in SLD presentation?
Usually not.
Interesting.
It is usually more that we're picking up difficulties in one gender perhaps more than the other, because it might be externalizing. So it might be more obvious to notice it in boys because they are reluctant, so they might be doing other things in the classroom rather
the way
than sitting
that they
quiet.
communicate that might be
Exactly.
different.
So it's the same with language disorder. We tend to pick it up more in boys because they demonstrate it with externalizing behaviours rather than internalizing behaviours. But statistically, no.
Okay. The reason I ask is because in OT we often see boys will have less of a tendency to sit down and do a tabletop task or show an interest in writing their name than in girls.
There was one other thing I wanted to mention too, was family history.
I was going to ask that actually.
So if we know that there's a family history, so we're always doing case histories, they're questions that we ask. If there is a family history of literacy difficulties or dyslexia or SLDs, then we need to be looking for that. And that constant assessment and review and monitoring is really important, because what it might look like at 4 is different to what it might look like at 6 and different to what it might look like at 8.
Yeah.
So I'll often get referrals where parents will say, oh, yeah, we did speech a few years ago, but then we were discharged because our speech sounds were now okay, or language picked up, and now we're back for learning difficulties.
Yes.
Yeah. Would we see most SLDs being diagnosed in primary school?
I hope so. Yes. Fingers crossed.
It's funny because, I mean, the demands in high school are so incredibly different to primary school as well. So I'd be interested to know as well, like the percentage that's happening in high school based on, you know, like less supports being put in place or changes to structure.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I do see it. Yeah. Definitely do see it all the time. Often diagnosing not just SLDs but developmental language disorder as well, because
that's a late diagnosis in high school, isn't it?
It is, but often kids will struggle and early on, and there might be some red flags and parents might consider it or consider an assessment or just not get to the process for whatever reason. And then the academic demands increase so suddenly in secondary school and it looks different. And I think, you know, kids can compensate. Yeah. Kids are really good at compensating.
Absolutely.
And if they've got good sort of like life skills, you know, like parents will say, well, she can have a conversation at the dinner table.
They've got those adaptive skills.
That's it. But does she have the academic language she needs for the Year 8 curriculum or Year 9 or even Year 10?
Great point.
So yes, they can have a conversation. They can answer basic questions. You know, what parents are looking for in language and literacy is not what we're looking for, right? So I can say, well, yes, she can have a really lovely conversation, but does she have those academic language skills? Because, you know, at secondary level and the way we write, and so we need different language and different literacy for writing and for reading comprehension, so text level work, than we do for word level work.
Yeah, right.
So that's really important to keep in mind.
Yeah.
Where would we start? What is the process of a family when they are hoping to, or maybe it might not even be coming from the family, it might be coming from another clinician as well, pursue a diagnosis of SLD? Who's involved? What's involved?
Sure. So from an age perspective, they need to have started formal schooling.
Okay.
And they need to be able to complete the tasks that are in a formal assessment. So they need to have some of started word level reading, word level writing.
Yeah.
So it's usually after about the first year of school. That's kind of roughly when we would look at it. And because we need to know that they've had some direct instruction, obviously, as part of the diagnosis. So has there been good evidence-based teaching, maybe some supports already in place and they've struggled to learn, so then we might do the assessment. Educational psychologists often do the assessments, but speech pathologists with additional training and understanding of SLD assessments can also do them.
Yeah.
And I'm a big advocate for that because we have that underlying knowledge of language. And I also feel it's really important to understand a student's oral language abilities in addition to their literacy skills, because we need those skills for reading comprehension and written expression. So if I was to do an SLD assessment, I would collaborate with a psychologist or I would need some cognitive data on how the student is functioning, but then a speech pathologist and a psych can do the educational components of that assessment. Yep. But I also think for parents it's important to really rule in or out language challenges as well. And so having that understanding of language. So sometimes I might do language assessments and literacy assessments and use some information from a psychologist, or I might refer for a cognitive assessment to go with my assessment, or I might already have some of those bits of information. And then if there are also handwriting challenges, then I would refer to an OT to look at that.
I was about to say, as an OT, where are we helpful?
You are really, really helpful.
I'm wondering, Melinda, as well, do paediatricians need to sign off on the diagnosis like they do?
No, they do not.
Good to know.
Yep.
That is, helpful to know as well.
Yeah.
One less bill to pay for families if they don't have
Absolutely.
to.
An expensive one usually as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so there are, depending on which pathway a parent wants to go down, we can talk about how we can get a cognitive assessment to make the process a little bit cheaper. But if they go to a psychologist first, that's often a really expensive process. And sometimes I might then have to say to parents, I'm not sure that language is not a contributing factor here, and we need to also look at oral language, so then the assessment gets a lot more expensive.
Yes.
So if we do it the other way, it can often be a little bit cheaper.
That's good to know. And you said, Melinda, that in order to do the assessment, speech pathologists require a little bit of additional training. Is it a good idea for us other allied health clinicians to make sure that we're keeping it? I mean, we refer to you guys all the time, but keep an eye out for making sure that the speech pathologists that we're referring to do have a special interest or additional understanding of literacy.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's, speech pathology, like OT, it's a really broad profession. People specialise in different things. I'm not the best speechy to go to for stuttering or voice therapy. I'll put my hand up for that. But I've got a lot of additional knowledge in specific learning difficulties. So we're really good as a profession also at saying, it's not really my jam, or I deal more with this, so I'll refer to a speech pathologist who's got a lot of additional training and expertise in that area.
Yeah. What are some common myths that you are aware of that you've heard, or misconceptions around SLDs?
Oh, there's lots. The first one would probably be the word reversals and the letter reversals. That's a really common one. Yeah. So not all children with SLDs have word and letter reversals, and all kids that have word and letter reversals don't have an SLD.
I was going to say it can be quite developmentally typical to do that in the first year of schooling. Yes.
Was and saw, confusing B and D. Those things are very common. So it doesn't necessarily mean the student has an SLD. But parents often say that, I think my child might be dyslexic because he reads the word was as the word saw. The other thing with that that's really important to remember is that if they do have those challenges, it doesn't mean it's a visual difficulty as well, because an SLD is not a visual processing difficulty. It's phonological, it's language-based. So the misconception there is that if they're reversing words or letters, that it's a visual processing problem, not a language processing problem. So they don't need to go off and see an optometrist. They need a speech pathologist or a psychologist to look at the phonological processing component.
Yeah, good one.
Another misconception, probably across all of our fields, is that if they worked harder, they'll get it. They're working so hard. Like you said before, they are in a school environment where there is language and literacy around them all day. They are working so hard to manage the demands of language and literacy in the school environment. So it's not a motivational issue. It's neurobiological. So pushing them to work harder is only going to increase their anxiety.
Sometimes my daughter, she'll be like, Mum, how do I spell this? And I'll be like, well, you have a go. She's like, I'm just too tired to have a go.
Because cognitive load.
Absolutely. The cognitive load is so huge. And I know, because she's usually so good at giving it a go, that she's like, this is just, I'm
not going to push.
I don't have the cognitive load to be able to do that.
I've got a client at the moment who probably in the last 3 or 4 months received SLD diagnosis, both in reading and written expression.
Okay.
And we were previously lots of supports in place for any handwriting tasks at school and that kind of thing. And Mum is, and I'll probably ask further into this chat around goals and that kind of thing, but Mum has asked for handwriting to be a priority in OT as well. And he wants writing to be easier as well. He's in grade 2, this young boy. And a couple of sessions ago, we were like literally just copying a sentence, and he was like sobbing. He was like, "It's just so hard." I'm like, "Oh, bud, I know." And he's so motivated for it to be easier, but he's like, "I'm just like, there's so much going against your wee little brain at the moment that's working so hard." And I can only, and then looking further into how he's going in the classroom, it's really interesting because last year had so many structures and supports in place to support with his writing, whereas now it appears that the teachers almost positioning demands at a place that he feels really competent in
that's so good.
now, which is good, but also maybe not like he's not being challenged even slightly. And so he's like, oh, yeah, at school writing's good. So it's really interesting seeing these kids in different environments as well.
Absolutely. And writing is such a complex task. It's a more complex task than reading. So often kids will make progress in their reading skills earlier on, and then it's the writing that tends to be the challenge.
Yeah.
And because there's so many skills involved, it's frustrating. It can be anxiety provoking. And sometimes it involves an OT for the handwriting, a speech pathologist for the language structure and the language component of it and the spelling. And then maybe some other allied health professionals to also deal with the anxiety and the stress and the exhaustion. And
they're just tired from like the work alone, let alone all the therapies that are going into it and the practice that comes around it as well. So I completely agree, that misconception of working harder.
Yeah.
It's a hard one to navigate.
Melinda, can I ask as well? I have a interest as to whether or not, obviously the English language is so challenging, and you mentioned that SLDs are neurobiological. Do we see a difference cross-culturally at all? Do you know? I really put you in the
you have.
She's like, interesting.
Not from a language perspective. Okay. So if a language disorder is present in a child's first language, it will be present in subsequent languages as well.
Interesting.
So therefore, I would assume, so I haven't done a lot of reading in SLD in other languages, but my assumption would be because the underlying challenge is language, that then they would have difficulty reading and writing in that language.
Yeah.
Yes,
that's the difficulty in language, not the difficulty in the language.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Really interesting.
Yeah. Good one. Any other misconceptions or myths?
Look, I think the low IQ one and intelligence is important to think about. So SLDs, you can have a specific learning difficulty regardless of your challenges with cognition, that you don't – in fact, a lot of kids with SLD have average or above average cognition. So that's not a determining factor, and that's really important to remember, and that has been a change in the DSM over editions as well. So regardless of their IQ, we can still provide support and provide a diagnosis for an SLD. I think that's really important. And just also, I think the understanding of the role of language. Like I said before, oral language is it's a biologically primary skill. We learn to talk first, and we learn to talk and then transfer that information to writing, and we learn to read and connect the words that we're decoding with our knowledge of the world. So we actually can't gain meaning from our reading, which is our ultimate goal of reading, is comprehension. We can't do that without language. We know that from the simple view of reading and all the other models that are out there, and the reading is language model. So I guess from a speech pathologist, I can't emphasise enough that role of oral language, and most of us don't understand that. It's part of our educational role to explain to parents that children will learn to talk first and learn to understand, and then they will transfer that knowledge to reading comprehension and also to writing. So the need for the language assessment first to know whether that's where our underlying challenges are is really important.
Yeah, really. It's so fascinating to listen
Isn't
to.
it?
So layered. This may be more of an OT goal, I guess. But I'm really interested I'm really interested to know, when you're working with a child with an SLD, how do we set like genuinely functional and like just right goals, I guess?
I love how you talk about just right goals for kids. It's a really nice term. We have to look at the kids and where they're at and what's a priority for them. So, for my older students, they might be wanting to write a CV and go through job applications. For a younger child, they might want to read their first chapter book. That is such a big deal, first chapter book. Get their pen license. That's a really big deal as well.
Absolutely
so
it is.
What's important for them, but they're also in the education system, and they've got to get through that education system, and that system has very set expectations of what is required as
ever?
well. So it needs to be functional from that perspective as well as what's important to them and what do they need literacy for. And it has to be assessment driven and guided by a comprehensive assessment. So I would never just jump in to literacy intervention. It really does require a robust, comprehensive assessment of lots of areas because, we're throwing around the term SLD, but that's an umbrella term. So I also want to know, and I've talked about oral language, but I also want to know about sound letter correspondence, so the phonic skills and phonemic awareness and rapid automatic naming and phonological processing and single word reading, single word spelling, sentence writing, text writing, reading comprehension, reading fluency. So there's a lot of tasks that I would put into a comprehensive assessment battery that would also guide intervention and intervention goals together with what's important for the child. But we can't just jump in at reading comprehension if we don't have phonemic awareness skills and decoding ability.
It's almost hierarchical.
Very much so.
Yes.
Very much so. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier something that you were quite passionate about is the intervention around SLD. So I guess from what you know, what approaches have good evidence that actually lead to outcomes?
Okay, so we know a lot. There is really good evidence there. Providing intervention that isn't evidence-based is not an option and not an excuse.
Isn't it still done quite a lot at schools, Melinda?
Philosophies vary.
Okay.
They do unfortunately vary from school to school. But the science of reading is really clear.
Yes.
And we have a lot of information. And it's not brand new information. There were really large studies done many years ago. So we've got the National Reading Panel out of the US that was like 2000, and then the Rose Report in the UK and the National Inquiry into Teaching Literacy in Australia in 2006, I think. So we had this data a long time ago and the research has continued to develop from there. We know a lot about best practice and what intervention programs would fit under that sort of umbrella of best practice and an SSP approach. So we talk about a systematic synthetic phonics approach to teaching reading.
Like mini-lit. And does that fit
fits
under that?
Yes, it does.
But reading recovery does not.
No,
and
correct.
was practiced for years.
That's right. And all that information has now been taken off the Department of Education's website.
Yes.
So there are some really good places to go. AusSpeld have produced a book.
Yes.
And I can give you the link for the
that'd
show
be great.
notes.
Great.
And they have also produced some information sheets that you can actually download on the internet. So they have information on which commercialised programs are available out there which would fit under a systematic synthetic phonics approach and are considered best practice because they have the evidence base behind them.
I took that spelled handout when I did school visits. And I was like, what literacy program do you use? Because I was like, I want to because I was so scared because up until maybe 2 years ago, I was still having students do reading recovery. And I knew it wasn't evidence-based and I was like,
what's the alternative?
Still doing that? So I wanted to make sure that the schools were doing the evidence-based thing. So for
what were you going to do if they weren't?
Well, I wasn't going to send my child there. So for clinicians who are also parents, but not speechies, very, very helpful. And we will put those in the show notes because, it's very easy. You kind of believe that a school will do the evidence-based things, but they don't necessarily.
No. Or one or two teachers in the school might have a good understanding of the science of reading, but the school those resources are not filtering down from the top.
Absolutely.
So it needs to be a school-wide approach. And if we look at the MTSS model, we also need to make sure that at all three tiers of support within a classroom that evidence-based teaching is taking place. So,
sorry, Melinda, what's the MTS?
So what it basically means, it's that triangle where you've got tier 1 at the bottom, tier 2 in the middle, tier 1 at the top. So response to intervention model specifically for looking at literacy difficulties and language, but at a whole classroom-wide sort of system model, it's called MTSS.
Gotcha. Yeah. I only referred to it at the single, like tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. So I understand now.
Yeah. So the challenge for schools is what they're doing at a whole classroom level.
Yeah.
Evidence-based and following the science of reading. And then at tier 2, when they're withdrawing kids into small group support, is that also being supported with evidence-based approach? And then for those kids that need that top level of support, more one-on-one, that's also evidence-based. So I've got some schools where they're running mini lit as an intervention program, which is great.
Yes.
Fantastic, but their whole school approach is not.
How interesting.
Yeah, and that's a challenge.
That would be, because if the primary teaching methodology does not align.
That's right.
We're on
probably
going
to mean that more kids need tier 2.
That's right, exactly. So that multi-tiered system of support needs to all follow the science of reading and be evidence-based.
Is there any particular interventions, I guess, that have really limited evidence behind it or none that you feel should simply just be retired?
Reading recovery.
Yes. Okay. Good to know.
Yep.
Yeah.
Anything
else?
I think working with the school leadership team to make sure they understand what the science of reading is saying and what strong evidence there is for programs that are phonics-based, that are systematic. So it's really important that they follow a robust scope and sequence. So systematic is really important. Synthetic is really important. So we're teaching kids to build their reading from sounds up. So from the simplest units of a sound up to words. So that's the synthetic component. And the phonics component. So we're actually teaching kids to build those sound-letter relationships. And it needs explicit teaching because it's not innate. It's not biologically primary. It's secondary. It needs direct instruction with support, repetition,
it makes
feedback.
It makes me think I've had a couple of clients over the years who have come and they have written right to left instead of left to right.
Okay.
And I have families who are like, I have to explain to them that that's innate. That's not innate.
Yes.
We teach it.
Yes.
So other languages read from right to left. And so parents are always like, oh, that's such a good point. I'm like, yeah, we have to teach it. It's not something that's innately like, oh, I read from left to right. You feel like it is because as an adult, that's just what you do.
That's right.
But watching my daughter, as I said, learn has also been very fascinating to be like, I can't even remember not being able to read. Like that's such a strange experience.
And so then when she's stuck on a word, it's not going to just come to her.
No.
She needs you to tell her.
Yes.
She needs you to say, that letter is making that sound. And when we put those letters and those sounds together, this is the word we make. And if it's got an unusual spelling pattern, she's not going to, oh, you're right. WR makes the R sound. She needs you to tell her that in that word.
Good old English language as well.
The magic E. We're all about the magic E at the moment. And the magic E shouts the name of the vowel and we're all about the magic because it is that whole, and it's commonly that she'll say to me, but Mum, that is a WR. Why does that make that noise? And the other day she was reading the word climb and she's like, but why can't I hear the B? And I was like, well, the B's silent. She's like, I have not learnt about silent B's yet. And I was like, no, you haven't.
We'll come back to that.
In fact, the B's not silent. It's MB. It's a digraph. It's making
there you go.
Sound.
Yeah. Wow.
We don't talk about silent letters. We talk about graphs, digraphs, and
that's another myth.
Yes, there you go. It is.
Yes, a silent letter is not silent. It's a digraph.
It's a digraph.
Always a digraph?
If it's with another letter making one sound. So a digraph is
like
two
a PH.
letters, like a PH, like an AI
like a
or an
GH.
AY, like a GH. Exactly.
Okay. All right. I've learned something new. Many new things, but I really like that one.
Go home and teach
it. Go home and correct myself.
We were speaking a little bit before we started recording around the recent changes to the DSM and where we used to speak to motor dysgraphia and dysgraphia and all of that kind of thing. So when we're thinking about that, so Danni and I were talking about now that we refer to motor dysgraphia as DCD in terms of that we often will be working with a client around their handwriting difficulties from a motor perspective. Where do you kind of see us all having differing roles when we've got a child that has been given a diagnosis of dysgraphia? Because as I mentioned to you earlier when I was looking at the DSM criteria for my client, in his report it was SLD in written expression and I can't remember the dot points under that. But I was like, oh, there's nothing motor there.
Yeah, no. So they are separate, yes, like we talked about before. So the motor component is what we did talk about as dysgraphia and is now considered to be DCD or developmental coordination disorder. Disorder of written expression falls under an SLD for the kids who have challenges with the language component of writing.
Okay, great.
So that might be the spelling, it might be the punctuation, it might be the word order, it might be the language processes that underlie the sentence writing and the essay writing, macrostructure challenges, which is the whole structure, or microstructure, which is more your sentence level.
Yes.
So I work a lot with kids who have a disorder of written expression. If they are struggling with the actual formation of the letters, then I would refer to OT to look at the handwriting specifically. But we do a lot of work around sentence structure, word level grammar, so the sentence level grammar, the word level grammar, the spelling, the punctuation. Yeah.
Is it because then I find it also kind of slots into where you're kind of saying like sentence structure and that kind of thing, but then we've got our kids that are like really struggling to get their ideas onto the page, but then when we look at it more, it's like an EF kind of path.
It's really complex.
It's so hard.
And I was thinking about that when I was listening to your podcast on handwriting. And, you know, we were talking before about a referral that we got from your practice where this child, your OT, was questioning whether it was an SLD. And we've done an assessment now and we've ruled that out. So from a language and a written expression perspective, those skills are all there, but he's obviously struggling to write. So we've done the right thing because we've now done that assessment and we can say, okay, it's not a disorder of written expression. There are obviously some handwriting challenges, but I think there's a lot of executive functioning challenges or challenges around the motivation and anxiety around writing.
I was going to say anxiety
in our
is
wheelhouse as well.
Like I've got a client at the moment and I've confirmed with the school multiple times. I'm like, just checking. Have you got any concerns about his actual literacy skills? Because he cannot sit down and do a writing task without his teacher sitting right next to him. And they're like, no, he's all good. It's just that he's incredibly anxious about getting it wrong and his spelling. He's recently had, I haven't got the report yet, but he has had a speech assessment now because I was like, oh, I just think we need to do our due diligence here and just get it all checked.
It's so complex and there are a lot of different skills at play when we're asking a child to write. So many skills at play. So there's a lot to break down and tick off. And sometimes I have to say to parents, look, it may not be language or it may not be an SLD. We're not going to do the assessment. We need to do the assessment to rule things in or out.
I feel like that's just as important to rule things out as it is to rule things in.
Absolutely.
And it's not like a waste of money if it comes back and it's not there because it can really help the team know what direction
it changes the intervention completely.
Absolutely. That's right. So we need to isolate exactly what it is that's challenging. And you also made a good point about how this student was writing if he had the teacher there next to him. So we've also got to look at what adjustments we can make to help in that process because the writing process is so complex. If it's using a computer, having someone sitting next to him, having a visual scaffold, working more on the planning and having a plan to work from, speech to text, it doesn't actually matter because we want to get them writing.
That takes me to my next question around assistive technology. From your perspective for clients with SLDs, is there such a thing as too early for introducing technology? So whether that be typing or voice to text or whatever it might be, can waiting to introduce those things cause more problems?
No, I think it's not an all or one.
Yeah.
So if I think about assistive tech, I'm not throwing out teaching reading or teaching writing just because I'm using assistive tech. Assistive tech is to help them access print effectively.
Yes.
So, one of the first things I'll say to a parent if I'm doing a case history and a parent's concerned about literacy, I'll say, do they listen to talking books? You need to listen to talking books. It's like my first recommendation because they need exposure to good print and to good narratives and good language. And if they're not reading, they're not getting that exposure to good language and narratives.
Yeah.
So, we know that handwriting skills build sound letter correspondence, and that's really important. So I think the more they're handwriting in those early years, the more they're consolidating those sound letter relationships. That's important. Probably those skills build more successfully from handwriting than from touch typing, my understanding.
Yep.
So
and that suits the evidence in handwriting, which is in the first 3 years of primary school, they should really just be handwriting.
Yeah, I think it really does help consolidate those sound letter correspondences.
Yeah, great.
But then we want kids. It depends on the goal. So if we want them to demonstrate their knowledge, we want them to demonstrate their knowledge. So whether that's
how they do that.
Exactly. So whether it's touch typing or whether it's speech to text, whether it's dot points, whether it's producing an audio file and submitting that to the teacher or doing a speech rather than an essay, they've got all this knowledge and the goal is for them to demonstrate that knowledge.
Yeah.
So whatever we need to do, right? But then we might still work on handwriting. We're still going to work on phonics. We're still going to work on decoding skills. And then similarly, if they're a secondary student and they are needing to access text, they need speech. They need text to speech. They need an audio book. They need to have the audio files that go with the textbook to help them access the information.
Readily available, like when it's been a while since I accessed a textbook. Like do they generally come with the textbook?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Cool.
They actually, they come as an electronic version that can then be read on the computer.
Yeah, great.
So they don't come with CDs anymore. They go in a CD. My last however many laptops don't have CDs.
Do you know what? My girls have a book and it had a CD in the back and it's a pretty new book. And I was like, what do I do with this CD? I don't have anything to put it in. And they're like, what's this? I was like, you don't need to know.
A PlayStation or something.
Yes, an Xbox. Yeah, I can play it on my Xbox. Absolutely. Yeah.
Right,
on my husband's Xbox. That's what I use mine for.
That's what I've heard. So, they can access so
that's
much
really
information without needing the textbook.
Yep.
And I think, we have to think about the goal.
Yes.
If the goal is to demonstrate their knowledge or to access information, however they get that.
Yeah. Very, we often, preach that to teachers a lot in terms of separating that in terms of, well, if your goal is to assess their handwriting, we need to remove the cognitive demands from that and idea generation and spelling and all of that kind of thing if we're just looking, because there's so many demands within a handwriting task.
Completely agree. Yeah. And I would say the same thing to a teacher about a writing task. If the goal is to understand their narrative structure and teaching them how to write according to narrative structure, then we're not going to be picking on their spelling or their punctuation.
It doesn't matter.
No, exactly. Yeah. So same thing for us clinically, whatever our goal might be, I might say to kids, I'm not worried about your spelling for this task. I just want to know that we can write a good introduction or we can write a good topic sentence or.
Yeah, great. We're going to finish with some sort of just quick fire comments, questions, that kind of thing. So don't think too much about them. But if you could change one thing that schools and teachers understand about SLDs tomorrow, what would it be?
Oral language as the underlying skill. So looking into oral language first.
Yeah. What's the most surprising thing a kid with an SLD has ever taught you?
That they can always learn if the learning is pitched at the right level and evidence-based. That they all can make progress.
Yeah.
Everybody's progress is different, looks different, is on a different trajectory. But they can all make progress and they can all enjoy it. You know, the best thing is seeing a student who's struggled with reading or struggled with writing for so long, and then you can provide them with a task that's at the level where they can achieve success and they can walk away and say, I can read.
Yeah,
I read
it's
that.
amazing.
It's so amazing to see a child say, I can read that or I can write that, and I didn't think I could.
Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you, Melinda. It's been very, very helpful, this conversation. I've learnt a lot.
Yeah, well, I'm going home to correct myself about my silent letter
I'm
statement.
going to be, once this is edited, I'll be sending it to the team being like, guys, so much to learn. Listen. But thank you so much for joining us. And, you know, we might have you back in future for something else. Who knows?
That'd be great.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Melinda.
Bye.
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 Before we go, if you are a clinician looking for more support between episodes, KidLink has a range of services designed to build your clinical knowledge and confidence. KidLink Education is home to our on-demand, high-quality professional learning you can apply straight away into your practice. If you want access to monthly PD, group supervision, and our community of like-minded OTs to learn from and connect with, check out OT-Link. We also offer clinical supervision, which is designed to support your growth across professional, clinical, organisational, and personal goals, wherever you are in your career. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit like, subscribe, and follow. It genuinely helps more clinicians find the show, which means a bigger community and more of us doing what we love. Thanks for listening.